She planned a death farewell party for her boyfriend. In October of 1995, Joe Cinque was living in Australia and was extremely close with his Italian family. After college, he loved to travel and eventually met a woman named Anu Singh who was a law student. After about a year together, they moved in with each other. Friends described Joe as supportive and caring, especially when it came to Anu's struggles with self-image and insecurity. But over time, Anu became convinced that Joe was secretly hurting her emotionally. She even blamed him for encouraging her to take weight loss pills after experiencing side effects from them. As time went on, Anu started telling people around her disturbing things. She talked about wanting to hurt Joe, her ex-boyfriend, and even herself. At one point, she even asked one of her friends to help her get a weapon so she could end her own life. But people around her thought that she was just joking and didn't take the threats seriously. Eventually, Anu decided that if she was going to die, Joe was going to die with her. And her plan was to secretly OD him with multiple substances. In October of 1997, Anu organized what she called a farewell dinner party for Joe. The terrifying part is that several people who were invited to this party knew what Anu was going to do to him, and nobody warned Joe. On October 24th, the first dinner party took place. To everyone watching, Anu and Joe looked completely normal and in love. That night, Anu attempted to go through with her plan, but she didn't give Joe a large enough dose. A couple days later, Anu hosted a second dinner party, and this time, Joe OD'd and he lost his life. The people that got invited to this party reportedly knew what was going on and stayed to watch as Joe got more and more sick. On October 26, around 12:10 p.m., Anu finally called an ambulance after Joe went into cardiac arrest. But investigators later discovered that she intentionally gave paramedics the wrong address so it could delay from helping him. Once police arrived, Anu admitted to giving substances to Joe, and she was arrested and charged with murder in October of 1997. But in 2001, after only serving 4 years in prison, Anu was released on parole. Once Anu was released, she went back to school and she's just out there living her life.
His parents brutally tortured him on camera and then fed his remains to the pigs. 3-year-old Adrian Jones was placed in the care of his father, Michael Jones, and his stepmother, Heather Jones. Adrian's parents pulled him out of school to homeschool him, but in reality, they just wanted to isolate him from all people. Michael and Heather starved Adrian to the point where he was eating out of trash cans to survive.
So you eat out of the trash because you keep on getting cold because you're outside?
In this video, you can hear Heather's harsh words towards Adrian and a lack of compassion for a desperate little boy. From a seemingly healthy Adrian to an extremely thin 7-year-old.
Adrian's parents installed 30 cameras inside their home so that they could record Adrian getting tortured and physically deteriorating. Michael and Heather repeatedly stunned Adrian with a taser gun for up to 20 seconds at a time. They would handcuff and bound Adrian to the walls for hours at a time. Adrian was forced to stand overnight in neck-deep, dirty water in their backyard swimming pool. Adrian's parents confined him naked in a shower stall, where he eventually passed away from starvation at age 7. Michael then bought pigs and fed Adrian's body to the pigs. Michael and Heather were both sentenced to life in prison and must each serve 25 years before being eligible for parole. Something that absolutely shocked me and broke my heart was the fact that Adrian did call for help. He asked authorities and social workers for help. And on that phone call, he said, "My daddy keeps hitting me in the head and punches me in the stomach, and my mom keeps pulling on my ears and it really hurts." He even mentioned that his dad kicked him so hard on the back of the head that a little bone came out. Adrian passed away believing that even after asking for help, nobody cared about him. What do you guys think about this case?
This father married his own daughter. 20-year-old Katie Plato was adopted from a very young age and grew up in Connecticut. When she turned 18, she reached out to her biological parents, Stephen and Alyssa Plato, on Facebook. After reconnecting, Katie moved in with them in North Carolina. At that point, Stephen and Alyssa were already separated and they were sleeping in separate rooms. But over the next few months, Stephen and Katie became disturbingly close. Alyssa started noticing their behavior, and when she questioned Stephen about it, he told her to stay out of it. Eventually, Alyssa moved out of the home with her 2 younger children. In May of 2017, Alyssa read one of her children's journals, and what she read horrified her. The journal claimed that Stephen and Katie were in a relationship and that Katie was pregnant. Alyssa confronted Stephen about this, and he admitted to everything, so she contacted the police. Despite the investigation, on July 20th of 2017, Stephen and Katie got married. They lied on their marriage license, saying they weren't related. And what's even more disturbing was that Stephen's mother and Katie's adoptive parents were at this wedding. In September of that year, Katie gave birth to a baby boy and named him Bennett. And in January of 2018, both Stephen and Katie were arrested on incest charges. After being released on bond, Katie moved back in with her adoptive parents and eventually told Stephen over the phone that she no longer wanted to be with him. And once Stephen heard this, he was furious. On April 11th of 2018, Stephen ended the life of 7-month-old Bennett, and authorities believe that it was due to suffocation. The next day, Katie and her adoptive father were driving through New York to go visit family when Stephen tracked down their vehicle and opened fire, and unfortunately, they lost their lives. Before ending his own life, Stephen called his mother and confessed that he had ended the life of Bennett, Katie, and Katie's adoptive father.
She locked away her daughter with Down syndrome and left her to rot in a maggot-infested room. Elaine Clark intentionally cut off her daughter, Debbie Leach, from society. Debbie had Down syndrome and was locked away in her room, abandoned by her mother. Elaine would starve Debbie and completely withhold access to basic medical treatment and hygiene necessities. Debbie contracted a skin disease where the mites multiplied rapidly. They completely encrusted her face, making her unrecognizable. When Debbie's aunt and cousin came to visit, they described Debbie and Debbie's room as a scene from a horror movie. Her relatives opened the door to Debbie's room and were hit with the most foul, unbearable smell. Debbie's room was pitch black, dark, and covered in dirty underwear and rotting food. Debbie was in a corner wearing stained and rotting pajamas. Debbie looked like a skeleton and was calling out for her mother because she was so weak that she couldn't walk on her own. Family members called social services, but Elaine cleaned everything up before social services arrived, so they saw no reason to remove Debbie from the home. Debbie spent her final months calling out for her mother in pain, crying and screaming, "Mommy, help me." Debbie still loved her mother very much despite all the abuse. Debbie passed away at the age of 24, rotting away in a maggot-infested room. Elaine was only sentenced to 9 years and 7 months in prison. I had to put my head down and take a minute multiple times while researching this case. I cannot even fathom how evil Elaine is. But what do you guys think about this case?
She was so heartbroken by the death of her son that she kept his body in their home for 12 years. And every afternoon, she would sit down and sew while talking to the casket that held his body. I feel like every town has that one story that's kind of turned into an urban legend over the years, despite it being very real. And for Medora, Indiana, that is the story of Aesop Wilson and what happened to his body after he died. So Aesop was born in 1843 to very affectionate and devoted parents, Sophia Douglas Wilson and Dr. Creed Taylor Wilson. He was the youngest of 5 in their big, beautiful blended family. When Aesop was 5, his father retired from his work as a doctor, bought a farm in Medora, and he built the family this beautiful 2-story brick house with all the fancy details and furnishings inside and out. It was truly a gorgeous place. But by the time Aesop was 17, the Civil War really had started to take shape, and local military leaders were putting together groups of young men to volunteer for the Union Army. And like most boys his age, Aesop desperately wanted to enlist. He just didn't want to be left behind while everyone else he knew went off to fight in the war. But his mother said absolutely not. For her, Aesop was everything. He was her pride and joy, her youngest child, the only one still living at home, and she told him he was way too young. She made it very clear that she would not allow it. There was no way she was letting him go off to war at 17 years old. Plus, his father's health was declining, and she really needed Aesop there to help take care of him. She even went as far as talking directly to Captain Gordon Tanner, the guy organizing the volunteers, telling him not to take her son because of his age. But despite all of Sophia's begging, one night in July 1861, Aesop quietly snuck out of the house and left without saying goodbye. He just ran off and joined the Union Army. He ended up being sent to Jefferson City, Missouri, and he'd write letters home to his family telling his mom all about life in the Army, but in September, Aesop sent what would be his very last letter. In that letter, he told his mom he was transferring to Boonville, Missouri, and that this might be his final letter for a while since mail didn't really reach his new station. And sure enough, the letters just stopped, but not because Aesop couldn't get to the mail. Weeks went by with no word, and then Sophia finally got a letter delivering the devastating news that her baby, her youngest son, the one she literally begged to stay home, had died of typhoid fever. It was absolutely devastating, and now the family had to try and locate Aesop's body and get him back to Indiana. By April 1862, after his father finally got in touch with a man from the area who helped locate Aesop's grave, Creed sent a metal casket to Boonville and arranged for his youngest son's body to be disinterred and brought back home. But Sophia was just absolutely overwhelmed with grief. She couldn't believe it was really her son in that casket unless she saw him for herself. So she had the casket opened, and when she saw her youngest child, she just refused to bury him. Instead, she asked for his body to be packed with charcoal, sealed back inside, and brought to her home where it stayed for more than a decade. For the next 12 years, the casket remained in the upstairs hall right next to a very big window, and every afternoon Sophia would go upstairs, she would sit in her chair and just sew while talking to the casket that held her son's body. During all those years, Aesop's father tried everything to get Sophia to agree to bury their son, but she just wouldn't let go. She couldn't do it. So around 1873 or 1874, Creed decided he would do whatever it took, and he actually hired a spiritualist couple from Louisville, Kentucky for $50 to come to their home and hold a seance, hoping that they could help his wife connect with Aesop's spirit. At that seance, those who were present said a faint voice began speaking, almost like it was hovering right over Sophia, and when she asked who it was, the voice said it was Aesop. And once Sophia was convinced it was truly her son's voice, she asked if he wanted his remains to be buried, and the voice said yes, and the very next day, Aesop was finally buried. 2 years after that, Aesop's father passed away, and then Sophia followed him in 1891, and after her death, the house just completely fell apart. Vandals and local teens started breaking in, and of course, stories about the place being haunted just started spreading like wildfire. People driving by late at night would say they'd hear a woman crying, or sometimes even see a candle or a lamp flickering in an upstairs window. And while all of that was happening, there were changes nearby that affected more than just the house. So when the old US 50 highway was built, it actually went right over Aesop's grave, so they had to dig him back up and move him again. After that, there really was nothing left of the old house, and in 1958, a church was built over the old basement and a smaller house went up nearby. I don't think the story is as well known as it used to be, and even though it definitely has some spooky paranormal elements, at its core, it's just a really sad story. I mean, a mother lost her youngest child and she didn't even get to say goodbye. She just felt like she couldn't let him go, so she kept him in their home until she finally agreed to bury him. To me personally, it just feels like she just wanted to protect her baby and truly believed he'd be safe with her, or that she just couldn't let go yet. But it's a very sad story. Let me know if you've ever heard this one, and I will see you in my next video.
At first glance, it looks like a father and daughter walking through a hotel until you hear who this man actually is. And then it's like a horror film unfolding in real life. It was 2014 in Northeast DC. 8-year-old Relisha Rudd had been living with her mum, Shamika, and the pair were really struggling financially. Shamika really did not have much at all in terms of money or possessions, and the pair were having to live in a local shelter. Sometimes Shamika even really struggled to feed the pair of them. So when the janitor of the shelter started to give them some handouts, Shamika couldn't have been more grateful. They couldn't believe their luck. This was 51-year-old Khalil Tatum. And on the surface, it seemed like he was a friendly older guy just trying to help out a single mum. He started giving the pair gifts. He took them to see Disney on Ice and then even gave the little girl a tablet, which was crazy because she'd never even seen a tablet before, let alone owned one. Me and you listening are probably thinking in hindsight, like, this is very weird. He's obviously got ulterior motives. But I guess it's kind of hard if you really don't have any money at all to refuse this, to say no. And Shamika actually had no idea that this man had a string of prior criminal convictions. Burglary, larceny, breaking and entering, really scary stuff. And this was actually the reason that he was working in the shelter in the first place. It was part of a rehab program after he left prison. And whether or not the mum knew of this next part is debated. Did she maybe just turn a blind eye because she was getting loads of money and gifts? But loads of women in that shelter came forward to say he was known as being a real perv, like he was very inappropriate with the women there. Now, one thing I absolutely could never defend is the fact that Shamika allowed this grown man, this 51-year-old man, to take her little girl away on an overnight trip. She said that he told her he was staying with his mum. I don't care if you're staying with Donald Duck. I mean, come on, why the hell is a man in his 50s wanting a sleepover with a little kid? And it gets even worse because Relisha suddenly stopped showing up at school in the February, and the school contacted her mum and said, where is she? And the mum and the nan said to the school the reason that she was not there was that she was unwell and she was under the care of Dr. Tatum. Khalil Tatum is a janitor, my darling. It was actually the school that ended up having to report this child missing, wild, not even her own mum. And this was around the 19th, 20th of March. By the time police started hunting for the missing girl, she'd not been at school for over a month. Investigators got to work looking absolutely everywhere, leaving no stone unturned, checking every single security camera that they could find. And they hit the jackpot. Grainy CCTV images of Relisha were found at the Holiday Inn Express, and she was not alone. On the 1st of March, which was weeks ago, bear in mind, she was captured, and the image sent chills down police spines. She was walking in the corridor with that convicted felon. And police started to piece together this terrifying puzzle. The same day that Relisha was reported missing, a chilling discovery was made in a different hotel. But it wasn't Relisha. It was the janitor's wife. Yes, he had a wife and he's taking a little girl to a hotel. Like, it's so messed up. Khalil's wife, Andrea, was found shot dead. And when police looked at CCTV, they found she was with the same man, the janitor. They'd been seen walking into the hotel together the night before. Now, police were obviously desperate to find this man that they were pretty certain was the killer and the abductor at this point. They were desperate to find him, and the search only ramped up when they found yet more disturbing CCTV of this man, this time of the day after he was seen with Relisha. He was buying a shovel and bin bags. But things were about to get a whole lot worse. At the end of March, Khalil was found dead in a shed in a park, pretty much ruining any chance of anybody finding out what happened to that little girl. He had self-unalived with the gun that had killed his wife, so I think we can probably all agree who was responsible for the death of the wife. But what happened to Relisha? I need to know your theories. To this day, she has never been found, and some say maybe she was sold to traffickers, and some are like, no, for sure she was killed. I also feel like the mum should have charges here, no?
People felt really bad for him as he spoke to the media about his missing wife, pleading and begging for her to come home and be with him and their 2 children. But the truth was much darker than anyone could believe.
Did you kill Lindsay?
Wait and find out. Wait and find out.
In 1995, the beautiful and bubbly 17-year-old Lindsay Wilson found out she was pregnant with her high school boyfriend. That relationship would soon end, and when 17-year-old Lindsay was 5 months pregnant, she met the 20-year-old Mitchell Quai. There was an instant connection. He quite literally swept her off her feet, and within 5 weeks of meeting, the two would be married. But almost immediately after getting married and Lindsay's daughter was born, Mitchell completely changed. Not only was he constantly cheating on Lindsay, but he was also super controlling and abusive. He would have these violent, angry outbursts out of nowhere. Lindsay and Mitchell would break up. There was actually one point where Mitchell moved out of the house and moved back into the house 7 times within a 4-month time span. He would always find a way to worm himself back in. There was one time after the two had gone back together that Mitchell convinced Lindsay that he had changed, and the two got pregnant with a child of their own. But when Lindsay was only 4 months pregnant, Mitchell got so angry that he just completely destroyed the place that they were renting. He ripped doors off the hinges, smashed all the windows, he destroyed their furniture, and even smashed up their car. And Lindsay's family was aware of Mitchell's abuse, and they would try to support her all the times as she said that she was going to leave him, but it was frustrating because she would always go back. Regrettably, they would eventually distance themselves from Lindsay a tad, which only isolated her more in this abusive marriage. marriage. On October 22nd, 1998, after spending a little time with her sister, Lindsay secretly gave her sister a note begging for help. Unfortunately, nothing would be done in time because less than 2 months later, on December 15th, would be the last time that anyone would ever see 21-year-old Lindsay alive. But it wouldn't be until February, 53 days since anyone had seen Lindsay, that the 21-year-old mother of two would be reported missing. But it wouldn't be her husband, Mitchell, that reported her missing. It was by a concerned social worker. When Mitchell was questioned, he said on Christmas Eve, Lindsay went out drinking with some friends. She didn't come home until really early the next morning on Christmas around 7 a.m. She was out of her mind, intoxicated. She packed a bag and left, and that was the last time he ever saw her. But he said that his wife was very much still alive because he had seen her out and about in town, which is interesting because no one else had seen her. And everyone that knew Lindsay said that she would definitely not leave her children. She loved her children. She especially wouldn't leave them on Christmas morning, and especially not with an abusive man like Mitchell. During the 18-month investigation, Mitchell did plenty of on-camera interviews, and he seemed to really like the attention. He was really playing into this role of the grieving, abandoned husband, left to care for two children all by himself. And at first, the public had a lot of sympathy for him. But the more that he would do these interviews, the more he started to show his true colors. He was super arrogant, and the public turned on him. They thought that he killed his wife, but he would stick to his story.
Have I made up the story that I've just told? Well, one day everyone's going to find out, aren't they? I didn't do that. I haven't done anything to Lindsay. I'm not capable of doing something like that. Like I say, I'm not going to sit here and start saying yes and no to stupid things, stupid questions I've already answered 1,000 times.
And just say again, and it's not a stupid question, it's a very serious question. Did you kill Lindsay?
Wait and find out. Just wait and find out.
He was also constantly smiling and laughing and making jokes, which really rubbed people the wrong way. There was one interview where he said he was so mad at Lindsay for leaving him with two children that he wouldn't even piss on her if she was on fire. He also said that he deserved an apology and money from the people that were accusing him of killing his wife. A year after Lindsay was reported missing, Mitchell was arrested on fraud charges because he was illegally signing Lindsay's signature to try to steal money from her bank account. But there was still no evidence that he had actually killed her. But after 18 months of investigating and knowing that Mitchell had killed Lindsay, the investigators, they quite literally had enough. And they brought Mitchell in for questioning, and they questioned him for 36 hours straight until he cracked and confessed. He said that on December 16th, Lindsay told him that she had finally had enough and she was filing for divorce, and he just snapped. He strangled her. And then afterwards, he called over his younger brother Elliot because he was a butcher, and together, the two of them dismembered 21-year-old Lindsay's body in the bathroom. And all of this happened while her two young children were in the house. And then afterwards, they disposed of her body in different locations. Unfortunately, to this day, not all of Lindsay's body has been found. Mitchell, at 25 years old, was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum sentence of 17 years, and his younger brother Elliot was sentenced to 4 years in prison for his role in dismembering Lindsay. And personally, if you ask me, I do not think 4 years is enough time at all. Mitchell first was up for parole in 2017. As of right now, he's been denied parole 3 times. He will likely be up for parole again sometime early 2025. But this would unfortunately not be the only tragedy in this family, because after learning what happened to his baby sister, Lindsay's brother, 24-year-old Peter Wilson, unalived himself in 2001. My heart truly goes out to all of Lindsay's loved ones, her children, her parents, who lost 2 of their children in the span of like 3 years because of Mitchell's actions. And I especially think of Lindsay's 2 children. I truly, truly hope the best for them and wishing the best for them. If you watched the end of this video, thank you so much. I'm so sorry I've been kind of MIA the past week. There's been something I've been dealing with in my personal life, but I should be back to my normal uploading schedule now. If you guys celebrated this past recent holiday, I hope you guys had a great holiday, and I'm so thankful to each and every single one of you.
She drove her car into the side of a building going 100 miles an hour. But was this an act of murder or a terrible accident? I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murders of Dominic Russo and Davion Flanagan. 17-year-old Mackenzie Shriller and 20-year-old Dominic were in a relationship that could only be described as toxic. Dominic was very business-minded. He had had some success selling cryptocurrency and stocks, and he had big ambitions of opening up his own businesses, including a clothing line. Mackenzie was an aspiring influencer where she would upload videos and hauls to her TikTok account where she was really playing up to the mean girl persona. People who went to school with Mackenzie said that she idolized Regina George and she wanted to be just like her. Mackenzie and Dominic had been going out for around about 4 years and they were described as inseparable, but that didn't mean that the relationship was a healthy one. The two would often get into fiery arguments. Mackenzie would get right up in his face and scream at him. She would degrade him. She allegedly got physically abusive towards him, and at the later trial, there was over 30,000 pages of evidence documenting this abuse. On one occasion, a person who was present during one of their arguments overheard Mackenzie make a chilling threat where she told Dominic that she was going to crash his car with him in it. In the early hours of the 31st of July 2022, a person who was walking down a very quiet road would notice a horrific accident. A car had driven into the side of the building and it looked catastrophic. Police and ambulance services would quickly arrive at the scene where they would pronounce 2 passengers inside of the car dead upon their arrival. That was Dominic and his friend 19-year-old Davion Flanagan. Mackenzie, who was the driver of the car and the only person inside of it to be wearing a seatbelt, was still alive. She was found in critical condition and airlifted to a nearby hospital for life-saving treatment. As she was in the operating room, police really started looking into the crash. They really wanted to figure out what exactly happened. How had that car ended up at the side of that building? Initially, this just looked like it was the result of a terrible accident. However, they would soon learn that they were very wrong. CCTV footage showed that after picking up Dominic and Davion from a graduation party, Mackenzie was driving regularly. She was driving sensibly like a normal person at a normal speed. As she kind of drove around this bend, she even indicated. But then within a split second, she slammed her foot down on the accelerator and was hitting 100. She was absolutely away, erratically driving down this quiet street. The car swerved on the road a couple of times, either from Mackenzie not being able to handle it at such a high speed, or someone trying to grab the wheel. It was later discovered that the gearbox had went from neutral to first, as if someone was trying to stop the car. Mackenzie drove with her foot down directly into the side of a building. Her black box would record that she was accelerating the entire time, and not once did she make an effort to press down on the brake, make an effort to stop the car. It was also discovered that, without any reasonable explanation, just a couple of days before the crash, Mackenzie drove this exact route. She drove it at around about the same time that the crash happened, almost like she was scoping out the area, wanting to see who would be around and how busy it was. Police soon learned just how toxic and abusive the relationship between Mackenzie and Dominic was. They would also learn that in the weeks and months leading up to the crash, Dominic had tried to break up with Mackenzie, but she wouldn't let him. She would threaten to take her own life if Dominic left her, which is a form of abuse. With all of this evidence and more, police became convinced that this was no accident. This was a deliberate murder. Dominic being the main target and Davion being at the wrong place at the wrong time. In November of 2022, Mackenzie Shriller was arrested and charged with murder. She opted for a bench trial, meaning that it wouldn't be a jury deciding her guilt, it would be a single judge. Despite being only 17 at the time of the murder and technically a minor, Mackenzie was tried as an adult. The judge described Mackenzie as, quote, hell on wheels, as she found her guilty of the murder of Dominic Russo and Davion Flanagan. Mackenzie was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 15 years to serve. Since her incarceration, she has tried to say that she does not remember anything about the crash and that she must have blacked out. Her parents said that she must have had a medical episode, pinning what happened down to her having POTS, which is a condition that can bring on fainting. However, no experts have backed up these claims. Comment down below and let me know what you think. Was this a deliberate murder or a terrible accident?
If I could only use one word to describe him, it would be vile. This potential serial killer held a woman captive because she wouldn't go on a date with him. Jeffrey Maxwell grew up in a really religious, strict household in rural Texas. In his teen years, he used to break into his neighbors' homes looking to steal like dirty, worn women's undergarments. He actually had a collection of about 40 women's undies that he had stolen. Despite being a total creep, Jeffrey actually got married right out of high school to a woman named Rita, but the marriage wouldn't last long. And by 29 years old, Jeffrey had met his second wife, a woman named Martha Martinez. Jeffrey and Martha had a child together, but they definitely did not have a happy marriage. Jeffrey was controlling, manipulative, and abusive, and would frequently essay his wife Martha to punish her. One night after an argument, Jeffrey gave Martha a bunch of substances to knock her unconscious, and then Martha was beaten and essayed by her husband. She would later be found laying on the side of the road, beaten and tied up with her throat cut from ear to ear. Miraculously, Martha would actually survive this, and Jeffrey was arrested for attempting to kill his wife, but unfortunately, Jeffrey would be acquitted, and afterwards, Martha would actually take him back. It's like she's been completely brainwashed. And the two of them would be married for another handful of years until Martha disappeared. Now, allegedly, Martha wrote a letter to her family saying that she was leaving her husband and her son, and then she was never seen or heard from ever again. But there's some really weird things about this letter. For one thing, Martha wasn't a letter person. She was more of like a pick up the phone and call her family kind of person. Jeffrey was the kind of person to write letters. Also, Martha's first language was in Spanish, and she always wrote everything in Spanish. But the letter that she sent to her Spanish-speaking family was written in English. Also, Martha would never leave her son, especially with someone like Jeffrey. 3 years after Martha disappeared, Jeffrey was granted a divorce, and then he remarried his first wife, Rita. But 2 days before their wedding, Rita's best friend reported to the police that Jeffrey had SA'd her. Of course, the police did nothing, and Rita still married Jeffrey. Rita had had some children from a previous relationship, and 2 of her daughters actually went to their school to say that their stepfather Jeffrey had been SAing them. The first time her daughters said this, the school told Rita, but nothing was really done. But the second time that her daughters went to the school, CPS took the children until Rita left Jeffrey, so she did. By 2001, Jeffrey had moved next door to a woman named Lois Pearson. Now, Lois, she's like a lone wolf. She lived alone, but that's how she liked it. She had no interest in dating or men. She had never even slept with anyone before, and I'm pretty sure she had never even kissed anyone before. But this was no problem with Lois. All Lois really cared about was nature and her 3 cats. All of Jeffrey's neighbors were creeped out by him, but especially Lois, because Jeffrey would continuously ask Lois out on a date. And she would politely decline him, but he would not take no for an answer. And he would actually tell her that she would regret saying no to him. And it would be like 4 years of Jeffrey continuously asking out Lois until he moved away in 2005. It would be 6 years, and Lois had never seen Jeffrey again, and I'm pretty sure she completely forgot about this creepy guy that asked her out on a date 6 years ago. But Jeffrey did not forget about Lois. On March 1st, 2011, Jeffrey drove to Lois's house. He pepper sprayed her in the face when she came to the door. He threw her in his truck and drove the 2 hours back to his house. Inside, Jeffrey tied Lois to the ceiling by her wrists, and she was like that for hours, and that's extremely painful, and she actually ended up dislocating her shoulder, and she was hanging from the ceiling for hours while he hit her and SA'd her. Most of the time that Lois was in his captivity, she was either tied to his bed or locked in a box in his basement, and he would continuously SA her. And Lois is a 60-year-old woman, and remember, she had never even been with a man before. On her 3rd day in captivity, Jeffrey was gone for hours, and that was because he was burning Lois's house to the ground. When he came home, he turned on the news and showed Lois her house in flames and then just a pile of ash. and Lois's 3 cats that were like her children were in the house at the time. When an investigation was done on the arson of Lois's house, no body was found in the ash. So Lois was being treated as a missing person. And because Jeffrey is such an idiot, he forced Lois to write him a $500 check so he could go shopping with her money. When he went to the bank to try and cash the check, Lois's bank account was listed as a missing person. So the bank called the police. When the police came to Jeffrey's house to question him, thankfully for some reason, Lois was not tied up at that exact moment. So she ran right up to the police and Jeffrey was arrested. At this point, it had been 12 days that Lois was in Jeffrey's captivity because she said no to going on a date with him 6 years earlier. Jeffrey's trial ended in 2012 and he was found guilty of all charges and sentenced to 3 life sentences. But at the time that his trial ended, it had been 20 years since his wife, Martha Martinez, had vanished. And the investigators were pretty convinced that Jeffrey had killed her. But not only that, they were convinced that Jeffrey Maxwell was a serial killer. In the year 2000, Amelia Smith was living right near Jeffrey when she went missing, and after her house had been burned to the ground, just like with Lois. It's very likely that exactly what happened to Lois is what happened to Amelia, but to this day, she has never been found. And in 2010, a woman named Shonda Townsend went missing for 1 year before her remains were found. All 3 women are believed to have been killed by Jeffrey Maxwell, but unfortunately there's just no evidence to actually link him. Please leave me all of your questions, comments, theories, and opinions on this case in the comments. I'm so surprised that this is not a more well-known case. Let me know, do you think that Jeffrey Maxwell is a serial killer? I mean, he definitely killed his wife, Martha Martinez. I think we can all agree on that. And while you're in the comment section, please let me know what case you want to see me cover next. I have a long list going right now of your guys' case suggestions. Until then, I love you guys so much, and I will see you guys tomorrow with another video.
I don't think that I've ever come across a story that fills me with such dread quite like this one. And it's not even just because these girls got lost in the wilderness. It's because when their camera was found months later, it contained these really disturbing photos taken in the dead of night with absolutely no explanation as to why they took them. And when their remains were found a couple months after that, some of their bones looked like they had been bleached. And not to mention, they were alive somewhere in the forest while an active search was being conducted for them, yet they still suffered a terrible fate. This is the mysterious death of Chris Kramers and Lizanne Froon, otherwise known as the Panama Girls. This story is incredibly disturbing, and there are no real answers, so let's talk about it. Chris Kramers and Lizanne Froon were 21 and 22-year-old friends who grew up in the Netherlands. They were described as really outgoing, creative, and incredibly smart girls. Chris had just completed her studies in cultural social education with a focus on art, and Lizanne had recently graduated with a degree in applied psychology. They shared a love of volunteering and wanting to help the community, and in early March of 2014, the two moved in together in a dorm room in Amersfoort. Everyone knew they were best friends and pretty much inseparable, and they even worked at the same cafe together. Since Lizanne had just graduated, the two wanted to plan a special vacation to celebrate, so they'd been saving up for about 6 months to take a trip to Panama. They wanted to spend the time learning Spanish and volunteering at local schools in Panama to teach children arts and crafts. This was going to be such an exciting trip for them, but not long after arriving, they would disappear. And what followed, despite horrific, has never been explained. On March 15th, 2014, Chris and Lizanne arrived in Panama, and they toured the country for about 2 weeks before landing in Bouquet, Cherokee. The girls decided to stay with the local host family while they volunteered teaching children in the community. They'd only planned to stay for about 4 more weeks, but it would soon become clear that they would never leave. On April 1st, 2014, Chris and Lizanne took the host family's dog, with their approval, and set out to hike the El Pianista Trail. They specifically wanted to hike the wilderness surrounding the Baru volcano, but before they did, the girls were last seen having brunch with 2 Dutchmen that they met while on the trip. There, they posted on Facebook that they wanted to walk around Bouquet and then go on this hike. After brunch, Chris, Lizanne, and the dog took off for said hike, never to be seen again. That night, the host family became concerned when their dog returned home safe and sound, but alone. The girls never made it back, so this is when they started looking around their home, but they found nothing. By the next day, Chris and Lizanne had missed an appointment with a local tour guide, and this is when the family knew something was horribly wrong. So they reported them missing to the police, who then took off searching for the girls. At this point, neither of the families were able to get a hold of the girls, which was odd since they talked daily. They would usually send them updates about their trip. After a few days of no contact, both of the girls' families went to Panama along with detectives from the Netherlands, and from there on, a full-scale search was conducted. This This was a massive search too, involving local police, tracking dogs, and helicopters, and their focus was on the El Pianista Trail since that's where they were last known to be. This trail is known to kind of start out easy, but as you progress, it gets pretty dangerous and it's so dense and rugged. It is definitely not an easy place to search, but after combing through the jungle for 10 days, absolutely nothing was found. This left investigators stumped and no one really knew what had happened. But a little over 2 months later, Lizanne's backpack was found. It was reportedly found by a local woman pinned against a rock in a really fast-moving river. This was near the village of Alto Romero in the middle of the jungle, and this was not close to the trail where they last went hiking on at all. In fact, this was about a 14-hour hike from the top of the El Pianista Trail. Inside her backpack was 2 pairs of sunglasses, $88 in cash, Lizanne's insurance card, a water bottle, some of their clothes, Lizanne's camera, and both of their phones. And the worst part is that both of their phones were in good condition. This was finally a clue into what possibly happened to the girls, but after going through their phone records, what they found is so incredibly disturbing. From the day they started their hike to April 11th, which was 10 days after they went missing, the girls tried calling the police for help 77 times. Since they were in the middle of the jungle, they didn't have any reception, so only one of the calls went through, and that one dropped after only 2 seconds. Records show that about 6 hours into their hike, someone called 112, which is the international emergency number used in Panama, and 911. The first call was made on Chris's phone at 4:39 p.m., and about 10 minutes later, they tried calling for help again on Lizanne's phone. Like I said earlier, over a period of 10 days, they continued trying to call for help, but none of them ever went through due to having no signal. Why they tried calling for help is still a mystery, but it's assumed that one of them got hurt and they were trying to call for help after possibly getting lost. Lizanne's phone died on April 4th, 3 days after the girls went missing, and it was never used again. But what's really odd though is that between April 5th and 11th, Chris's phone was turned on and off a handful of times, probably trying to look for a signal. But during those times, a wrong PIN code was entered, so they weren't able to actually unlock the phone. If that was one of the girls doing that, no one knows. But it's really odd that the PIN was repeatedly entered wrong. On April 11th, Chris's phone was turned off for the last time at 11:56 a.m. What's really devastating to think about is the fact that while this was all happening and they were trying to call for help, there was an active search for them being conducted not just by police, but by their families in the same jungle, yet they were never found. If you think that was disturbing, wait until you see what they found on their camera. So the camera contained photos of the girls starting their hike, and the first few photos show them taking a trail at the overlook of the Continental Divide. This was the last photo ever taken of the two, and after that, photos show them walking deeper and deeper into the jungle, and this was just hours before that first initial 911 call. Nothing appeared too unusual at first until police stumbled across these. These were taken on April 8th, and these were some of the last photos that the girls ever took. 90 photos were taken to be exact in the dead of night between the hours of 1 and 4 a.m. They showed the girls' belongings spread out on some rocks, and it looked like they were possibly near a river. This is the image that truly does it for me though. It's the last photo ever taken on the camera, and it's of the back of Chris's head. Some say that it looks like she's bleeding in it, but I'm not entirely sure. It's so scary to me that only a few of these photos are clear, but the rest of them showed nothing but darkness. So because Lizanne's backpack was found, this sparked a new search along the Culera River, and this is when authorities found some of their clothes on some surrounding rocks just a short distance from where the backpack was found. And 2 months later, another disturbing discovery would be made. Not far from where the backpack was found, authorities found a broken pelvis and a woman's boot with a foot still inside of it. In total, 33 bones were found scattered along the same riverbank, and after DNA testing, it was confirmed that they belonged to Chris and Lizanne. But here's the thing. Lizanne's bones seemed to have decomposed naturally as she still had some skin attached to the bone, but Chris's bones looked like they had been bleached. Whether or not that was from sun exposure, which is typically normal, we don't know. But aside from Chris's broken pelvis, which authorities don't know if that happened before or after her death, the bones were in pristine condition. There weren't any marks or signs of trauma, but combined, only 15% of their bones were ever found. A post-mortem examination confirmed some animal activity, meaning it's likely that the rest of their bones were carried away by wild animals. Because there were no signs of trauma and how little of the bones were found, their cause of death could not be determined. Although to this day we don't know what happened to the girls, there are a few theories. One being that they possibly had an accident during their hike, with one of them getting hurt. That sparked them trying to call the police for help, but when they couldn't get a signal, they decided to hunker down and camp out for the night with the intention of trying to hike for help in the morning. Then when morning came, it's possible that they just went the wrong way along the steep riverbed where they would eventually be found. This led them deeper and deeper into the jungle with no way out. Then they just died of exposure after not being found. Investigators believe Chris possibly died on the the night those photos were taken, which was the 8th. Their theory is that Lizanne took those photos to try and help her, maybe trying to use the flash to see. Or it's possible that they heard someone or something out there in the wilderness and used the flash to either scare them away or get their attention. Maybe then Lizanne tried to hike away on her own for help, but died in the process. No one knows for sure if they tried walking along the Changuinola River, which is known to locals as the Grinder. It's a really dangerous spot with sudden flash floods, and you have to cross a lot of really old rope bridges over the water. It's just a really dangerous area that even locals avoid. So it could be a possibility that they tried doing this and just accidentally died. Another theory is that the girls were met with foul play out there in the jungle and that someone else was involved. Some question whether or not the backpack was planted, but to me it kind of seems unlikely that it was. But one thing that kind of fuels this theory is the fact that no one knows who took those last known photos on the camera or why, and the fact that the wrong pin was entered on the phone several times. That doesn't seem right, considering the girls probably knew each other's passwords. But I truly don't think we will ever know what happened unless they find the rest of their remains. 2 years ago, it was said that a couple of journalists planned to go back and search a dam at the end of the river, because according to them, Panama authorities never tried looking for the rest of their remains. They just closed the case as undetermined and kind of just said that it must have been an accident, mainly because of the dangerous terrain. A lot of people question how this case was handled back when it initially happened. All I know is that I've never felt such dread when reading about a case like I have with this one. The entire thing is something straight out of a nightmare, and the fact that there aren't really even any answers is terrifying. But it's now been 11 years, and whatever happened to Chris and Lizanne out there in the wilderness remains a mystery.
It shatters my heart into pieces that the one thing that we know is true, the one thing that we know for sure is that she suffered. Such a big warning at the beginning of this video, not only because we're talking about a child, but also because the details in this are incredibly graphic. If you think that listening to this is going to harm your mental health in any way, shape, or form, take care of yourselves. Your mental health is number one. Always has been, always will be. So if you think that listening to this is going to be damaging to you, skip this video. I will see you in my next one. Take care of yourselves. I mean it. I love you. 12-year-old Lola Daviette was born in 2010 to her parents Johan and Delphine, both of whom worked in property management. She was one of 3 kids. She had 2 brothers, and the family lived in an apartment in France. Lola loved to hang out with her friends. She loved gymnastics. By the sounds of it, she was a very creative little girl. Her mother has described her to be her mini-me and a sociable, loving, happy-go-lucky girl who was always willing to help others. October 14th of 2022 was a Friday. That day, Lola had her usual Friday plans to go to school, walk home from school, and go straight home to hang out with her family. So that's what she did. She left school, she made her walk home, she made it all the way to the front steps of her apartment and inside of her apartment building, yet Lola never actually made it inside of her apartment. Every single day, Lola made it home by 3:30 p.m. at the latest, but 3:30 came and went and Lola was nowhere to be found. And then 4 o'clock rolled around and there was still no sign of her. And by 4:30, her parents were worried sick and they couldn't and wouldn't just sit around and wait any longer to see if she was going to walk in through the front door or not. So her father made the decision to call the police and officially report her a missing person. And while her parents waited for the officers to be dispatched, they sat down and decided to look through the CCTV footage from their apartment building because her parents had access to it given that they were the property managements for the building that they lived in. They pulled up the footage and they saw that by 3:20 p.m. Lola walked inside of that building followed by a woman behind her, which was strange, but not that strange because the woman behind her looked to be a completely normal human being. In fact, after even zooming in on her face, Lola's parents recognized the lady as someone that they had seen before. And other than the fact that she was seen walking really closely to Lola, there was really nothing about her that stood out. Yet something had to have happened to prevent Lola from actually getting home because it was obvious that she was seen walking inside of that building, assuming that she had intentions to walk through her front door in any moment. So what stopped her from doing so? And most importantly, where was she now? Where did she go? With that, of course, as soon as the officers arrived at their apartment building, the parents showed them the CCTV footage. And now it wasn't only, okay, everyone spread out, keep an eye out for Lola, look for her everywhere, but it was also remember that lady's face and see if you can find her as well to question her about anything that she may have seen or done. While the officers were roaming the building, seeing if they could find anything that would be beneficial or may lead them in the right direction, Lola's mom turned to social media. She posted a screenshot of the CCTV footage with Lola and the random lady asking for help in finding her daughter. They wanted everyone in the area to be aware of Lola's disappearance as soon as possible, to have as many eyes looking for her as they could. The more it spread, the faster they would be able to hopefully bring Lola home. Now, one thing about this case that would prove to be very beneficial for investigators was the amount of CCTV cameras that were spread out throughout Paris. It did not take long for them to see the same woman that was last seen with Lola caught on a different camera around 5 p.m. the same day of her disappearance. The woman was seen on camera walking around the area, but she seemed to be carrying and pushing around a plastic bin and some suitcases. That in itself pointed a very, very harrowing picture of what could have happened to Lola. And they knew they were looking at the right person because the woman that was seen at 5 p.m. on camera footage carrying around, pushing around the suitcases and those things with her was wearing the exact same outfit as the woman caught on CCTV camera footage with Lola at her apartment at 3:20 p.m. But sadly, any hope that Lola's family members had of her being able to return home safely would be crushed that same night on October 14th. At 11 p.m. that night, authorities received a call from an unhoused man calling to report the findings of a human body. The man had been walking around the area near the apartment complex in which Lola lived in when he spotted what he described to be a plastic travel trunk as well as 2 suitcases just left alone out in the open. When he looked inside the trunk, buried beneath fabric, he found the deceased body of a little blonde girl. The body had signs that whoever did this had tried very hard, put a lot of force into trying to fit this body into the box, crushing it in the process. And there were signs that the little girl had also been tied up. Authorities responded to the call to come and collect the body, and it was identified to be that of 12-year-old Lola Deviette. The autopsy stated that her death was, quote, caused by mechanical asphyxia due to obstruction of the nose and the mouth, end quote. It also stated that her head was almost completely off due to a gaping wound on her neck, that her spine was compressed, and that her skull was partially split. Even though it was more than noticeable, the autopsy also showed that the body was covered in injuries caused by a sharp weapon. There were at least 34 of them, and a lot of those injuries were proven to have happened after she had already passed. Lola also had signs that SA had taken place, and in a very strange and unsettling detail, the numbers 1 and 0 each had been written on the bottom of her feet. When her family members were given the news that Lola had been found, their entire world came crushing down. It was now confirmed that their family of 5 was now a family of 4, and they had lost the most precious person to them that they all loved so much. It was already the worst news that they could ever possibly receive, but as investigators kept piecing the story together, trying to figure out what happened, things only got darker. By the next morning, authorities had figured out that the woman seen on the CCTV footage with Lola was a 24-year-old Algeria woman called Dabia Benkrad. Dabia's 26-year-old sister lived in the same apartment building as Lola. Both sisters were from Algeria and had moved to France on student visas back in 2016. And the morning after the discovery of Lola's body, authorities found not only Dabia but also her sister walking around Paris casually as if it was just any other day. As soon as they saw them, they arrested them and took them back to the station for questioning. So they began talking to the sisters. I believe they were questioning them separately. And Dabia's older sister, Freya, confirmed to authorities that yes, they had both been born and raised in Algeria, that they had moved to France to study, and at the time of the investigation, Freya was subletting an apartment in Lola's building, and she mentioned that her sister Dabia would frequently come over and stay with her. However, according to her recently, there had been something off about Dabia recently in her behavior, and it did have a lot to do with her mental health at the time, since the sisters had both recently lost their mother. Well, actually, her sister said that there had kind of always been something a little bit off about Dabia. She called her, quote, the bad seed of the family, and described her to be a very problematic, manipulative, untrustworthy person. But most recently, Freya said her sister had been experiencing what she called waking dreams and had been making incoherent remarks, to the point that Freya wasn't even comfortable spending any time with her sister whatsoever at all. Now, as far as when they questioned Dabia herself, it did not take long for her to make a full confession. They asked her about the apartment complex, they asked her about Lola, they asked if she knew of her, and they told her that she had been found deceased the night prior, and Dabia almost immediately told them that she was the one responsible for ending Lola's life. According to Dabia, this was her initial recollection of events. That Friday on October 14th, she was outside of the apartment building about to walk inside when she noticed Lola. She walked up to her, started making small talk. I imagine that she was being friendly and nice and presenting herself to be a normal, trustworthy person, because somehow, some way, she was able to lure Lola into her sister's apartment. They made their way up to the 6th floor, entered Freya's apartment, where it was just the two of them, and once inside, Dabia forced Lola to get in the shower, and once she was out, she S8'd her. Specifically, she forced Lola, a child, an innocent child who has no way of defending herself, she forced Lola to perform certain acts on her, for her own pleasure, which is sick, and afterwards Dabia claimed that she put tape over Lola's mouth and nose until she was gone, during which she later said she began to play music to draw out the sounds of Lola attempting to breathe. So she's sitting there in front of authorities confessing this to them, but then later on she turns around and says, never mind, I lied, it wasn't me, I didn't do it, must have been a stranger. But then she comes back again and says, never mind, I lied again, it was me, but it was an accident. And then she goes, oh, actually it wasn't me, I actually think that it was a dream, that I dreamt that I did do it, but I didn't do it, so it wasn't me. And then the next day again she would say that it was her, until she eventually landed on the story that it must have been a ghost. Yeah, a ghost. She was saying, yeah, guys, I figured it out. It wasn't me. It was 100% a supernatural being. I mean, she was all over the place. It's hard to even know if she was even aware of the story she was trying to keep straight, because the things that she would say would just contradict one another over and over again. And some of the things she was saying were just flat out insane. Regardless of whatever story she was trying to say, her first story, her first confession still didn't make any sense. sense because she said, yeah, I took her to my sister's apartment, I essayed her, and then I put tape over her mouth and her nose, but that was it. Although we know from Lola's autopsy results that a lot more was done to her than just that. She was covered in injuries from head to toe, not to mention the damage that was done to her skull and her spine. Besides that, there were also signs of a struggle in the apartment building cellar, suggesting that something could have happened down there, yet according to Dabia, everything happened inside of her sister's unit. It wasn't adding up. The dots were not connecting. Finally, Dabia tells investigators something that she had not said before. She told them about a vendetta that she had against Lola's mom. Because remember, Lola's parents were the property managements for the building in which they lived in, and according to her, she once asked Lola's mom for a key card to be able to let herself in and out of the building, and when Lola's mom told her no, she decided that she was going to get rid of her permanently, but when she couldn't find her, she decided to just make Lola her victim instead. But in regards to that, Lola's parents have said that that never happened. That wasn't true. Dabia made up the entire thing. It's so disturbing, really, how many different stories Dabia said, because every single time it was just like a different way to hurt Lola's family, and oh God, she's just the worst. During the time that she was being kept under custody, officers went out to try and talk to witnesses to see if anyone else saw anything, which is when they ran into a man called Amin. This man was apparently a friend of Dabia's who she had called for a ride shortly after ending Lola's life. When he came to pick her up, they drove back all the way to his house that was outside of Paris, hung out there for a few hours before Dabia took a cab back to Paris and back to the apartment complex. The entire time, Dabia was hauling the trunk and the suitcases with her. Who knows if they talked about it, if the man knew what was in them? I don't know. But she had them with her. Amin would later be charged with helping to conceal a body. Other sightings of Dabia from that same afternoon came from other witnesses, people in the area near the apartment building who saw her carrying around the plastic trunk and the suitcases. One of those was a man who worked at a cafe that Dabia stopped at only minutes after leaving the apartment building, again with the trunk and the suitcases, and the man asked her what was inside, to which she responded by saying, quote, kidneys, end quote. As soon as that man later saw that the body of a little girl had been found, he called the police to report this. At the time of their arrest, both Dabia and her sister were under a, quote, obligation to leave French territory, end quote, because their student residence permits had expired. So following their arrest, Freya was sent back to Algeria. Dabia, however, remained in custody. She was put in solitary confinement for a while before she was sent to a mental hospital. There, every single doctor that saw her said that she had a very troubling mental health state and that she was clearly psychologically unstable. But in the same breath, they also stated that they could not find signs of any disorder that would cause her to commit such a crime. Because of that, she was deemed fit to stand trial. And during the trial, when a forensic pathologist was asked if Lola suffered at the end, the expert replied that she, quote, undoubtedly suffered, end quote, which is so terrible. After a week-long trial on October 24th of 2025, so just a few days ago, Dabia was found guilty on all 3 charges and she was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, making her the first woman in France ever to be handed that sentence. In court, she stated, quote, I know I killed a baby, an angel. She must be in heaven now, end quote. As you can imagine, losing Lola for her family members was the hardest thing that they ever had to go through, the hardest thing that they now had to learn how to live through. And it breaks my heart to say that for Lola's father, the pain got to be too much. Lola was the light of his world, and without her, he found it really, really hard to find motivation to keep going. He fell back into habits that he had once recovered from, and in February of 2024, he lost his life to a heart attack. To this day, Lola's mother, his wife, says that he passed away due to grief at the age of 49. Before his passing, Lola's father wrote a letter that read, quote, my darling, I still don't understand why there was so much cruelty and barbarity towards you, you who were so kind, end quote. Both Lola's mom and her brother have been very public about how losing Lola meant losing the light of their life and how they will struggle every single day from now on. I read that they were glad that Dabia was handed the harshest punishment possible, even though compared to what they lost, that really means nothing. But I am more than glad that she will be behind bars for the rest of her life. Yeah, it's terrible, terrible story. That is all I have for today. Thank you guys for spending time with me today. Thank you for sticking to the end if you did. And more than anything, thank you for listening to Lola's story. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
He went to a ski resort in Quebec, Canada, and vanished into thin air as he was walking back to his hotel room. He somehow managed to be seen on plenty of CCTV footage, up until this moment right here, where he seems to be walking to the side of his hotel after a night of partying. But he never actually enters the hotel, and this exact moment right here is the last time that he was ever seen alive. Absolutely nothing since, and it's now been a year of not knowing what happened to him after this footage. This is the disturbing disappearance of Liam Toman, and I can't stop thinking about what could have possibly happened to him, so let's talk about it. This is Liam Toman. He was only 22 years old when he vanished from a Canadian ski resort in February of 2025. Liam was from Whitby, Ontario, and he came from a really big and loving family. He had an amazing sense of humor and was incredibly social. He had one of those silly laughs that always stand out, and he was really tech savvy. In the spring prior to his disappearance, he graduated from college with an electronics technician diploma, so there really wasn't anything that he couldn't fix. One of Liam's favorite things to do was go skiing with his best friends. So on the weekend of January 31st, 2025, that's exactly what they did. He and two of his best friends took off for a planned skiing trip to the Mont Tremblant Resort in Quebec, Canada. This is a really premier ski resort that's spread out over 662 acres, and it also features a European-style village where there's tons of restaurants, bars, and of course the main hotel. The main hotel is called the Tour des Voyageurs II, and this is where Liam and his two friends were staying. The trip started out great, but little did anyone in the group know that one of them would soon vanish without a trace. So on February 2nd, 2025, Liam and his friend spent the day on the slopes. That evening, all three of them went out for a pizza dinner, but after this, one of his friends decided to go back to the hotel to get some sleep. But Liam and one of his friends wanted to stay out and continue the good time. So at around midnight, the two of them made their way to a local bar called Le Petit Caribou. Together, they drank a little bit and had fun, and at around 2:30 that morning, Liam's friend wanted to go back to the hotel, so he did. Liam ended up staying behind. At around 2:45 a.m., a man in the same bar saw Liam approach a group of women that he just so happened to be with, so the man politely told Liam that they all had partners. But the man did invite Liam to sit with them for a little bit and chat, so he did. Then 3 a.m. rolls around. This is when Liam's friend texted him and told him that he made it back to the hotel and wanted to know what his plans were. But Liam didn't answer, so the friend called it a night and fell asleep. It was around this same time, 3 in the morning, that Liam decided to leave the bar as well. It was reported that on his way out, he was captured on CCTV alone, but he passed by two men having a fight on the street. Liam reportedly said something to them, but the men just laughed because Liam was speaking in English, not French. After this, Liam is seen walking back to the hotel, but he never ended up actually making it back to his room. In fact, it's not known what happened after this, but Liam vanished into thin air. The next morning, now Sunday morning, Liam's friends woke up to find him not in the room. At first they thought it was a bit weird, but really they thought that he probably just slept somewhere else that night. They tried texting him but received no response once again, so they ended up leaving and going skiing without him. As each hour passed, they tried texting and calling him more and more, and they grew more concerned as each call went unanswered. By 6 that evening, they probably had about 20 calls go unanswered, so this is when they really started to worry. Friends called Liam's dad to let him know what was happening, and his dad told them to immediately call the police, so they did. Right off the bat, police pull the surveillance footage from the surrounding area where Liam was last known to be. There they find CCTV of him leaving the bar alone, like I mentioned earlier, and then he's caught several more times making his way through the village on his way back to the hotel. The hotel is about a 3.5 mile walk from the bar where he and his friends were at that night, so it was a pretty long walk, especially at 3 a.m. Intoxicated, and when the weather is negative 30 degrees Celsius. He was seen so many times walking briskly back to the hotel, and then this is the very last time he was ever seen alive. It was at 3:20 that morning, and you can see Liam walking up to the hotel and talking to two people just out of frame. These two people he was talking to were later identified as seasonal workers at the resort. They said they couldn't remember exactly what they talked about, but Liam seemed perfectly fine. So back to the footage, Liam is then seen pointing in a different direction and then walking off that same way. This area led to the side of the hotel, but after he walked out of frame in that direction, Liam vanished and nobody knows what happened happened to him. This led to a massive 12-day search for him by local authorities, volunteers, and specialized teams. With the weather being so cold, time was not on their side, so they needed to find him, and fast. Authorities searched using ATVs, snowmobiles, horses, and even helicopters equipped with infrared. I mean, no stone was left unturned. His family came in to help with the search, and in total, over 100 miles surrounding the ski resort and mountain was searched. The village was turned upside down. Over 100 officers went door to door knocking for any sign of Liam. They scanned the lake that Liam could have possibly ended up in. Every back road was searched, snow piles were removed, and divers even checked the swamp. This disappearance was huge, and everyone knew about it. Every single car that entered Mont Tremblant was stopped and given a missing person flyer, so this was an intense search. But even after all of that, Liam nor any of his personal belongings were found. It was like he vanished into thin air. This is when police returned to the security footage of Liam, which they had plenty of. But the weirdest thing that stood out was the fact that there was no video footage of Liam ever entering the hotel that night. He got close to the entrance, and then he was seen walking to the side of the hotel, but nothing shows him actually entering the hotel at all. Then authorities turned to his phone records, which provided some weird additional insight into Liam's last known moments. After looking at his phone records, Liam sent one final text and phone call the night he disappeared at 3:15 a.m. He sent a text to his dad that said, quote, "Meet me outside," end quote. It's assumed that he meant to text one of his friends that he was with at the hotel, not his dad. But this is something that really stands out in this investigation. So Liam sent that last text and phone call literally 5 minutes before he was last seen on security footage. And then after this, nothing. His phone last pinged in the vicinity of the hotel at 3:20 a.m., which is also when he was last seen on CCTV. According to his phone company, Liam's phone was active, online, and charged until 6:24 p.m. on Sunday, the day he was reported missing. So there are 15 hours between when he was last seen to when his phone officially went offline. What's weird is that it didn't abruptly turn off as if he fell into a body of water or anything like that. It just went dead or was turned off 15 hours later. So this left police wondering what the heck could have happened to him. As time went on, more searches were conducted, but it wasn't until late March that something was finally discovered. On March 22nd, 2025, a resort employee found Liam's wallet in a parking lot near the hotel where he was staying at. It was buried under some snow, which, when it melted, that's when they spotted it. His ID and hotel keycard were still inside, but Liam's dad confirmed that all of his cash was missing. There could be a few explanations for this, though. Maybe he spent it all at the bar that night, or maybe it was stolen, which could provide a motive for Liam's disappearance. Regardless, though, Liam's family said that he was always protective of his wallet and personal belongings, so he wouldn't just be careless with it like that. This has been the only clue to ever surface in the disappearance of Liam Toman. None of his other personal belongings, like his phone, have ever been found, and as of this recording, Liam remains missing. And although we don't know what exactly happened to him, there are a few theories. Theory number one is that Liam got lost and died of exposure. Leaning into this theory, some speculate that maybe Liam accidentally dropped his wallet on his walk back to the hotel that night. And I don't know about this specific hotel, but I used to work for a hotel in Seattle, and I would lock the entrance into the hotel after a certain hour for security purposes. So maybe this hotel did the same and locked its doors. And now without a wallet, ID, or key card, maybe Liam couldn't get into the hotel. Their website says they have 24/7 reception, but maybe Liam didn't know that. So one theory is that he talked with those seasonal workers about another entrance into the hotel, and then he walked off to the side trying to find another way in. He thought he texted his friend to come down and meet him outside, but instead texted his dad on accident. And then when his friend never showed up, maybe Liam wandered off trying to find some warm shelter or something of the nature, and then maybe he got lost and died of exposure, and maybe he just hasn't been found yet. Maybe he wandered off into the woods surrounding the hotel, and since everything was still pretty frozen, maybe he just slipped and fell somewhere, accidentally passing away. There is a lake somewhat near the village, but according to locals, it's not something that you would just stumble upon by accident. There's a lot that you'd have to pass through in order to get out onto the lake, which was frozen at the time. So it seems unlikely that he did that, and if he did, it seems like he would have easily been found by now. It's just weird that absolutely nothing has been found to indicate if this was an accident or not. Theory number two is that Liam was a victim of foul play. Maybe the two men who were fighting outside the bar that night followed him back to the hotel and struck when he was alone. As far as I know, though, they weren't ever caught following him on security footage. so this seems unlikely. Maybe he wandered off trying to keep warm, waiting for his friend to reply, and was a victim of a hit and run. And then the person who hit him maybe dumped his body elsewhere. Again, though, no evidence of this was found, which I feel like if this were the case, there would be blood or a glass or something to indicate this happening. Some think it's possible that Liam wanted to stay out and hitched a ride with a stranger, and then was met with foul play that way. But of course, these are all just theories, as Liam has never been found. This is still an ongoing investigation, but police say his disappearance now appears to be criminal in nature. On Monday, it will have been 1 year exactly since Liam went missing. He hasn't used his phone, bank account, or any of his social media since he disappeared, and his family says that it's not like him to just vanish like this. If you were in the Mont-Tremblant area the first weekend of February 2025, please look at any photos, videos, or dashcam footage that you may have to see if anything stands out. All it takes is one small memory or something that seems out of the ordinary to make a difference and potentially solve this case. Liam was last seen wearing a black and dark green patterned coat, black pants, and a green plaid sweater. All I know is that his family has been relentlessly searching for him, and they won't stop until they bring him home. This is a very popular ski resort where so many people from across the world come and visit. Someone has to know something, and with the season now open again and so many fresh eyes out there, this is a better chance of finding him and bringing him home. Liam's family created this website with more information and what you can do to help. There is currently a $50,000 reward for information leading to his whereabouts. Check this out and show your support, and if you have any information at all, make sure to contact this tip line. But it's now been 1 year since Liam disappeared, and whatever happened to him at that resort remains a mystery.